to SPJIMR's Consulting Symposium 2013. Hope you enjoyed the break. We now move ahead on to our next section, Mindspeak, a panel discussion on this year's theme, sustainability, a choice or a business imperative. I would now like to introduce you to our esteemed panel of experts comprising of leading academicians, consultants, and corporate leaders to share their views and experience on the topic.
Our first panelist for the event is Mr. Anand Bhagwati. Mr. Anand Bhagwati is a principal at Bain & Company. He is part of the leadership team for a variety of growth strategy, sales acceleration, and performance improvement cases across diverse sectors like pharmaceuticals, industrial goods, and infrastructure. He has experience in sales and marketing in FMCG, followed by different roles in management consulting. He has led several key projects in the field of customer and sales strategy, go-to-market strategy, operational improvement, and cost reduction. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Our next panelist for the evening is Mr. Vivek Bhatia. Mr. Vivek Bhatia is a principal at the Boston Consulting Group. He's a core member of the Strategy and Sustainability, Industrial Goods and Energy Practices of BCG. He's the India sector co-lead for the Engineered Products and Project subsector. During his consulting experience, he has worked extensively in the industrial goods sector across a range of industries, including power equipment, engineering, metals and mining, and cement. He has advised several clients on strategy, operations, and organizational issues covering topics such as growth, diversification strategy, business operations turnaround, working capital management, JV formation, to name a few. We welcome you, sir.
We welcome our next panelist and our host for the event, Professor Prem Chandrani.
Thank you very much.
Our next panelist for the event is Mr. Rajat Gupta. Mr. Rajat Gupta is a director at McKinsey & Company. He has served several clients in India, China, US, Europe, and in Africa. He currently leads McKinsey's energy and materials practice in Asia. In recent years, he has worked with several large industrial companies on transformation programs spanning operational improvement, organizational effectiveness, and growth. He has keen interest in sustainability, particularly for carbon, space, and water. He has co-authored the recently released report, Environmental and Energy Sustainability, an Approach for India. We welcome you, sir.
Our next panelist is Mr. Chaitanya Kalia. Mr. Kalia is a partner in advisory services and leads climate change and sustainability services practice for Western India. He has over 15 years experience and has worked with 80% of the top Indian companies in the area of climate change and sustainability. He has worked with industry and the government of India of over 25 countries. He is an invited member of the expert committee advising the Indian Designated National Authority on issues related to climate. We welcome you, sir.
Our next panelist and also a keynote speaker for the entire event, Consulting Symposium 2013. Please welcome Dr. Stephen Melnick.
Our next panelist for the event is Dr. Avinash Patkar. Dr. Patkar is the Head of Sustainability at Tata Quality Management Services and Chief Clean Tech Applied R&D at Tata Power. Dr. Patkar has worked in the field of air pollution control and energy efficiency in the US for 30 years. Dr. Patkar is also the convener for Sustainability Council within Tata Power that has developed the corporate sustainability strategy. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next panelist for the event is Ms. Diksha Vats. Ms. Diksha Vats is an Associate Director at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She is part of the Sustainability Financial Advisory Services Division. Her experience includes environmental due diligence audits, development of environmental management systems, water and waste accounting, clean development mechanism projects, corporate sustainability reporting, among others. She has been advising clients in developing their sustainability strategies across various sectors like power generation, industrial manufacturing, telecom and finance services, to name a few. Welcome, ma'am.
Now we welcome the moderator for the event, Ms. Ira Dugal, Resident Editor, Mumbai, NDTV Profit.
All right, very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome once again. As you know, we've got an esteemed panel here helping us discuss the issue of sustainability. May I just request you all to stay out of the line of sight of cameras if I can? Yeah, now that everybody's settled in. The issue is sustainability, and as I was trying to prep for this session, speaking to all our esteemed panelists, I think sustainability is not very easy to define, but what came out as one of the best possible definitions from our panelists is to look at sustainability as an ecosystem. So build a business in an ecosystem to ensure that the business is sustainable, but the ecosystem is perhaps equally sustainable. That's the big picture context. Within that, there are several micro points. You can look at environment sustainability, you can look at social sustainability, and you can also, from a business standpoint, look at sustainability as an opportunity, perhaps. Over the next hour and a half, we are hoping to cover all of those and far more aspects. I'm not going to go through the introductions right now. You already heard who the panel members are, but we will start with a brief overview of what everybody defines sustainability as, what are the elements of sustainability, what are the challenges and the opportunities there. Perhaps I'm going to start with Professor Prem Chandrani. I mean, somebody very familiar to all of you, but sir, it'll be interesting to understand why you've picked this subject right now, why the students have picked this subject, because I think from an economic standpoint, even from a news standpoint, this is a very, very pertinent issue, and so perhaps important for students to pick up and understand the various contours of it.
Thank you, Ira. We chose this theme this year because we felt that businesses are beginning to realize and be aware that sustainability is a requirement, but they haven't really been able to absorb and come up with a thought or an approach about how they can make sustainability a core part of the way the business is actually being done. You know, for many years, regulations have been in place, and what regulations have been able to do is to create a lot of awareness that sustainability is something that is required to be looked at, because if we don't look at sustainability, we may not actually see, businesses remaining or surviving in the long run. But regulations have had only a minimal impact, okay? Just as much as is required to be done, just because of the compliance that needs to be done. And often we find that some organizations actually game the regulations. They turn around and do what is required to be done, maybe not in spirit, but just in law. Now, what is to be done subsequently, and how is it that we are able to, or should we be able to get the businesses to look at sustainability on a more sustainable basis, if I can use the pun again? Okay. The point is that there must be an internal motivation among businesses to work towards sustainability. And how does one get that motivation? We know that over a period of time, we have seen that businesses have their, they are responsible to what we call the stakeholders, basically. And unless the outcomes of the sustainability activities are aligned to the outcomes that the stakeholders are expecting, businesses are unlikely to go ahead and, on their own volition, take up activities that would actually work on the sustainable plane. And therefore, it's important that businesses should now be able to see how they can align the sustainability activities with the business strategy. Now, we have a panel of consultants today who actually are doing a lot of work in the sustainable space, and I'm expecting that they would share with us some of the work that they're actually doing out there. The objective is basically to see how in the short run and also in the long run, we start seeing business strategy and sustainability going hand in hand together. Because that's the only way we can see that this is how sustainability actually will continue. Concomitant issue is an issue about governance, basically, out here. The stakeholders' definition is important. Stakeholders are not just shareholders who are expecting returns. Stakeholders, the way the companies should look at them, should include their employees, should include their customers, should include society and the community. Okay, so when we're looking at a larger definition of stakeholders, perhaps the alignment of business strategy to meet the requirements of the larger definition of stakeholders might allow the companies to have the ability to align business strategy with the requirements of the expectations of these stakeholders. This is why I thought it's an important topic to talk about, and I'm quite confident that we will hear quite a few ideas today.
I'm sure we will. Before we get down to the consulting side of the panel, I do want to get Dr. Melnick in as well. Dr. Melnick, it'll be interesting to hear from you on the international experience in India. This is just starting to get discussed. But I just want to understand from you as to whether what you've seen and heard here so far is broadly along the lines in which the international business community has moved as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. What's happening in India is that India is now starting to become a growing economy. And what you're encountering is the fact that the issues that you are now finding are issues which are not unique to India. Lack of resources, the fact that you're finding that we're starting to look at how do we respond, how do we deal with some of the obstacles which are preventing us from moving forward. And what I mean by that is people when people apply sustainability in their operations, they're concerned about issues such as, do I have the time? What happens if I make the wrong decision? And what Indians are now discovering, in my mind, is some of the same things we've discovered, which are things like the paradox of waste, which is, if we do things that make sense, the system tends to discourage us from doing that. You know why? The costs are up front, the benefits are downstream. The costs are firm, the benefits are not certain. The costs, you bear the costs, but everyone else bears the benefits. And those are the challenges which Indian firms are encountering. They're the very same challenges that we've seen encountered elsewhere. But what's interesting about India is that you're seeing a sense of compression. You're growing very quickly. You're trying to become a world economy. You are becoming a world economy. And you have a chance right now. In some senses, you have a chance that we don't have in the West. Because in the West, we have an infrastructure that's based around a certain approach. You have a chance to build an infrastructure from scratch that makes sense to the broader perspective. So that's the reason I said it was an interesting question is because it's an environment which is more tight, more compressed. It's an environment where you're finding the same challenges, but it's also an environment where you don't have the heritage that we do. We have a heritage of mass production. We thought about that for a long period of time. India has a chance to do things which make sense in terms of small-scale production, which makes sense in terms of capturing all the costs and benefits. And so you have a chance, in essence, to do it right, instead of us trying to correct it.
Build sustainability in a sustainable fashion, I guess. Let me get straight into Dr. Patkar's view, because I think he's the sole corporate sector representative here. Dr. Patkar, I guess at the base of it is, does corporate India get the concept of sustainability over and above just CSR, over and above what is just mandated and regulated? Is there a sense coming in corporate India that this is something that you have to do to make your own business and your own sort of profitability sustainable in the longer term?
Thank you for picking on me. Good afternoon. I am really a rare bird. I notice I have two eminent academicians as panel members and 5 other consultants. Now, I don't remember who said this, but somebody said that those who can go to industry, those who can't either teach or consult. Present company excepted, of course, okay? I have been a consultant. I have also been a teacher, so I only mean that very lightly. I cannot really talk about the entire Indian industry. Main reason is because I spent 32 years in US, and also in last 5 years I only worked for the group of Tatas, the Tata Power and now Tata Quality Management Services along with Tata Power. I think sustainability is a new concept, relatively new concept in this decade. We are all becoming aware of it at various degrees. It's a journey. The journey has started. And now the question is, all of us need to decide what sustainability means to us individually, as a company, as an individual, as an organization, as an institute. And the starting point would be to talk to all our stakeholders, like Professor Chandani said, and understand what it means. So I'll give an example. I'll give a specific example, so I think hopefully you all will understand it better. At Tata Power, we said, when I say worship sustainability, it's kind of difficult to say, what does that mean? Then you could say, let's worship Saraswati. Then you start getting some animate subject in front of you. Then you say that Saraswati is Chaturbhuja Devata, 4 arms. So what are those 4 arms? So for example, in case of Tata Power, we said we should look at environment and excellence in environment. We should look at motivating our employees to be doing sustainable things in their duties. Let us be an employer of choice for them. In terms of customers, let us be the supplier of choice, provide sustainable services to them, understand what they want from us. Same thing for suppliers. And then finally, community, among which our plants are located. So we need to understand even well before we go there, in terms of procurement of land, what their sensitivities are, what their needs are. And while we are running the plant for 30, 40 years, we need to be a neighbor of choice. So that was the idea. Now this same goddess, if you can visualize, in those 4 arms also has 4 tools: Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Kamal, let us say. So what are those tools we looked at Tata Power? We said one is, of course, technology. You should use clean technology to the extent possible, as long as it's cost effective. Another is, we call it mutual learning. That means that we don't necessarily know all the answers, so we should talk to the regulators, the NGOs, and many other groups, academic and other consultants once in a while, possibly, and learn from them best practices. Number 3 is actually find out what are these best practices worldwide by talking to, again, maybe excellent institutes around the world. And number 4, we said architecture of care, and that's a little bit of a poetic concept, which means not just buildings which we build and factories we build should be sustainable and energy efficient and so forth, but people should want to come to these facilities. They should love to come there and reside there for a day, or for our neighbors, our community should feel that our plant has come in the middle of them and it's not a sore thumb. So these are aspirations. So it's a journey, but I can certainly say the journey has started. Let's say we have started at Churchgate. Have we gone to Virar? No. But I suspect we have crossed the other, right? Okay? Those of you in Mumbai would know what I mean, I hope.
The journey has begun. I have to say that, while it would be the ideal situation for corporate India to find it within itself to do all of this, I'm not sure every corporate would do it, which is where regulation and law comes in. Let me just request Chaitanya Kalia to help us understand how the law and the regulations are evolving in this respect. Again, on CSR, for instance, the New Companies Bill has done a lot to try and impose CSR to an extent, which is part of the overall sustainability debate. It may not be the sustainability debate in itself, but it's an important component, law and regulation.
First reaction of the bill, which I heard from one of my clients, was, okay, so now government asking companies to do something which is their primary responsibility. Because what the company bill government is asking, a certain set of company, probably about 2,500 to 3,000 companies in India would qualify if they have profit more than 5 crores and turnover more than 1,000 crores. They have to spend 2% of their revenue, which is profit after tax, in CSR spend. And they have also defined area where you have to spend, and several of them, I would say 60–70% of them, it requires to be spent in the social benefit. So that's where the starting point for the companies are. But at the same time, they are ready to do it, and it's not that companies are not doing anything about it. They are definitely doing that, and it's required for factory to operate in a specific area. It is required for employee benefit. It's also required for, the connected stakeholders benefit. So several of things it's companies they are doing. The key change which would happen because of the company's bill is now every company have to constitute a board which will be headed by a director in the board, and the and spend, which can, the company may run to 50 crores to maybe 200 crores. They have to declare that. And that is what probably is going to be the challenge. But that it's opening a different chapter. Definitely it's opening a different area where a lot of disclosures will happen, a lot of information would be made available to the public. Several of us would know what companies are doing, how they are spending this kind of money. And I think that is going to be very interesting in the sense how this landscape changes and how people are getting benefited. It can work both ways. For the community to get what they are looking for, and also several programs can get structured because it's not a one-time spend. It has to happen year on year for several years. So I think that's a very interesting change which will happen through Companies Bill 2012, and I would encourage audience to go through and read that clause 135.
That's the law and the regulation change. Let's talk a little bit about what is being done in the industry right now. And I'll start with Mr. Anand Bhagwati. Give us a sense, I mean, you may not be able to name clients, but as we talk about sustainability, laws in place, regulations in place, what is the realm of conversation that you have with clients? Are they talking about building in core systems? Is it an additional group add-on still, or is it changing?
Thanks, Ira. So I think this is quite a fascinating because this is quite an evolving and new baby in India right now. And as I speak to some clients and speak to people who are interested in this, and as I was introspecting, I'm almost struck by the similarity between this and how we treat exercise in our daily lives. And sometimes it's easy to see a parallel and then understand how people are looking at the same thing. So for example, some people say they have exercised, they take a gym membership, forget about it. I see some clients doing what I just call as false propaganda, okay? Then I see some people doing what is mandated. So my daughter has a assembly in the morning. She has to do it, but she may have chips in the day, So some clients are really taking this and doing what is mandated by the law, and some of the bills, etc., will do that. And then there is a very small set who's saying, does this make sense for my business, either from boosting profits or reducing risk? Pure and simple. Business which can be quantified in the P&L. And then saying, okay, I'm going to do this as a regular part of my life. So I know a few people also who jog every morning, and I don't really need to tell them it may rain or shine, but they do it, right? And that's part of their daily living. So what's interesting here is I see a variety of approaches evolving. And when I take a step back, I think the key question is, why do different people do different things about the same topic? And that's important to answer, because if we don't get that, we will see the same situation happening that has happened on exercise. That yes, the gyms are there, the tools are there, everything is there, but you see a very few people doing it in letter and spirit, and a vast majority either fudging or just doing something for the sake of doing it. And as we discuss this, I'd love to get some thoughts from the audience as well, but I think if we can get more people to understand how this fits into their core business P&L, that'll be interesting. Otherwise, this will be something which will just, it'll be like one of the exercise cycles which is bought and then used as a clothes stand. So that's the way I see this right now.
Mr. Bhatia, are people seeing this as a core business function? What are you advising them, people that you work with?
Thanks, Sira. I think first of all, people are waking up. I think the degree to which they have woken up is different, but people are realizing that it's really not a matter of choice, but it is something that they really have to do. And I think the responses have been mixed. I mean, the typical response you will see is that when someone wakes up and says that, look, I have to do something, I think the first and immediate focus tends to be on looking at resource intensity. And the immediate response is, can I reduce the amount of power that I'm consuming per ton of whatever I produce? Can I reduce the amount of water consumption? And that is, the immediate short-term, most appropriate response that people believe is feasible. But that's really the short-term solution. If you've really imbibed this into your business model, and if you really believe that sustainability is going to be a fundamental driver of the business going forward, and if you have to believe that there's a paradigm shift happening in terms of the availability of natural resources going forward, then I think the really smart guys are thinking about this beyond just resource intensity. they're thinking about, what is the kind of solution, what is the kind of product that I'm going to create, which is inherently going to succeed in a resource-constrained environment, right? Not just reducing the resource footprint and the intensity, but can I think of a reverse supply chain that, once I've thrown a product out into the market, I'm able to bring back the end, at the end of its life cycle, product back into the cycle, and, reuse everything and, recreate the product from what I had shipped out some time back. I mean, that's just one idea. But, the really smart guys are not just thinking about the short-term, reduce the resource intensity kind of approach, but they are really imbibing this concept into the way they think about their entire business. And that forces them to rethink the product that they're offering, forces them to rethink, outputs, as we were talking about earlier in the day, to focus more on, outcomes, in the sense that, do I still meet the needs and requirements of my customers or my key customers as I see them, but in a radically different way, which is far more sustainable and which fundamentally creates a competitive advantage for me vis-a-vis, people who will continue to focus on purely resource-intensive mitigating measures.
Mr. Gupta, one way is, looking at that product level if you're a product company. The other way, I guess, in the resource sector would be just to look at the constraints of natural resources and realize that at some point you're going to face those constraints in your business, so you have to start trying mitigating those problems.
Yeah, I will come to an answer on your question, but I think just to lay out a slightly broader context to this, which will inform what companies are able to do and what we as human beings are able to and not able to do on this subject. Let's just step back and look at the frame and the magnitude of the problem here on the environment or the question of sustainability. The issue and the reason this problem is there today, more than it's been there before, is because we have to, or we are in the process of lifting 3 billion people across the world from destitution or want to the middle class. This is happening in China, this will happen in India, or is in the process of happening. This will next happen in Africa. Over a 20-year period, this is what will happen. This is relative to 2 billion people being in the consuming class in the world today. So that's point number one. It's a good thing. The trouble is created by something good, which is we are trying to raise the living standards of people, 3 billion people, get 5 billion people in the middle class out of the 7 billion population of this world up from 2 billion. So it's a problem that's created because we want to do good for the world. We all want to live better. Okay. Now, as a result, what's happening? The resource challenges are increasing. We do seem to be running out of certain kinds of resources. So geological inflation, which is the difficulty of getting at materials and the additional cost of getting at materials, is running at 8 to 10%. Right? The resources are being degraded in that manner. And for the first time in the last 40 years, if you look at something like mining productivity, it's actually gone down. Right? So the gains made in the 30 years before that have all been taken away in the last 10 because of this geological inflation, for example. So as a result, you have more volatility, you have more, the converters of materials or resources are actually having to face a higher amount of volatility because the resource cost in their cost base is now much higher. So huge amounts of difficulty for the industry and flowing through to the consumer. So these are a couple of things that we ought to keep in context. Now, so sustainability is not a niche, nice-to-do thing. It is core not just for companies, but core for us as humanity. Right? It's about using our resources, whatever limited resources we have, plus whatever we may be able to add, to provide a better life for our people. So let me just again frame the magnitude of the change problem that we have here. It took 125 years to increase labor productivity by 10 times during the Industrial Revolution in the US, for example. 125 years, okay? Keep these numbers in mind. Now that 10-time resource productivity increase that has to happen for water or for carbon productivity or energy productivity, that needs to happen in 40 to 50 years. Okay, so the time frames are much shorter in which we have to go through that same transformation if we are to make people live better and we are to deal with the constraints of the earth, in a sense. Okay, so that's the setting and the magnitude of the problem. Now, that's the problem. Where's the solution? The fact is that the solution is there. So if you take technologically all the solutions that are available, if you take behaviorally the things that people can do, and if you take perhaps us thinking about well-being as being different, not just being income, right? If you take a combination of those factors, the solution is there, right? So as opposed to energy requirement increasing by 50%, steel requirement increasing by 80%, land requirement doubling, cropland requirement doubling over a 20-year period to bring the 3 billion into the middle class, we can actually work with 30% less just by virtue of being much more efficient with the use of materials. Now let me take India as an example. 75% of India of 2030 has not been built yet. We'll have 6 times as many cars in the normal course of things. Cars, scooters, buses, trains. We'll have 6 times as many of those. We'll have 7 times as many buildings in India 20 years from now relative to today. Right? So India hasn't been built as of now, in effect, right? 80% of it. In this context, there are 4 sets of actions we can take for the India of the future. Companies can take, but also individuals and we can take. One is around energy efficiency, just using more energy efficient products. We talk about that all the time, LED lighting, CFLs, etc. Second is green infrastructure. So if we can actually transport our goods by rail instead of transporting them by road, right, that's much more energy efficient, or by water. So green infrastructure of that kind, densification of cities, of having people live close to their places of work. Right? These are things that companies can do, but a nation can make them happen, and we as individuals can be aware about it and make them happen. So what's happening in Parel in central Bombay today, right, where the development is probably by serendipity, offices are next to homes. Now that reduces energy intensity. That reduces the load on environment, need for transportation. There's clean energy, of course, which a lot has been talked about. And then there's even green agriculture, using less water in agriculture. So if, for sugarcane, if you can actually use drip irrigation, which is possible to do, technologically possible to do, it's not widespread, you can actually increase the income of the farmer on the one hand and reduce water use dramatically. And if you can do this at scale, then you can make a big difference on the water and consequent energy use for the country, right? So these are the 4 areas in which the solutions lie. So it's really efficiency of energy or water or whatever resource it may be. It's green infrastructure, building things differently. It's clean energy, and it's often agriculture, where a lot of land-related and water-related opportunities lie for the world. So, that's the frame in which the opportunity exists. So maybe then coming back to the question that you raised about what companies are doing and can doing, as in anything, there are leaders and laggards. McKinsey does a survey annually on sustainability. About 3,000 executives respond to this survey. And if you look and cut the leaders in sustainability from the ones who are laggards, there's a 40-point difference in responses. So there are leaders and there are laggards. There is a difference between companies in the way they are looking at it between the sectors they lie in. So for example, those in the resource sectors are trying to figure out some of the things, Vivek, you talked about, which is they're thinking about how to use the resource better and get their customers to use their resource better. So the aluminum companies are saying auto companies ought to be using aluminum in their engine blocks because that reduces the weight of the car, that reduces fuel consumption. Right? So the resource companies are a little bit more looking outside of their business areas. On the other hand, if you look at consumer-facing companies, the FMCG companies, for example, the retail companies, they're actually quite good at looking at the entire chain and saying, I need to think about it from a resource all the way to the consumption perspective. We talked about Unilever earlier in the morning, and Unilever is thinking hard about how to reduce the water use in washing. Now, if they can halve the use of water in washing, that's huge amounts of water reduction, right, for the earth. Right? And the outcomes are still the same. You get clean clothes.
Right.
So companies are doing a bunch of these kinds of things.
Absolutely. I think we'll have to look at it in a granular fashion, look at different industries. But let me get Ms. Watts in. Ma'am, you made an interesting point when we were discussing this earlier about the ability to look at this not as black and white and to look at sort of, I guess, practical solutions. Ideal would be one side if you're speaking to an NGO, it would be another end if you're speaking to a corporate. But I guess from a consultant standpoint, the idea would be to come up with a sustainable and a practical solution to all of this.